All right, gentlemen. So, good morning. Lots of great stories to cover that came out yesterday, and a lot of good, I think, good stuff that might be the secret to unlocking some inventory for this market, which we're going to get into. Two really, really, I think, positive things came out yesterday that we're going to cover in today's episode. And then I want to talk about the greatest lead generation strategy that no one's talking about, that nobody focuses on. For whatever reason, I don't know, but we're going to jump into it. So before we jump into the episode, if anybody watching or listening to the show wants to raise their level of accountability, wants to get into a coaching relationship so that you can extract your highest potential, we will put a link to schedule some time to talk with our team about our Listing Agent Academy. We'll put it right underneath this video. Feel free to click it, schedule some time, and then we can talk about whether or not it makes sense to work together or not. So, gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
So let's first start talking. I want to we'll dive in and talk about the bill that was earlier released this year, that essentially their belief in, if this thing passes, is going to unlock some inventory for us, because the bill would increase the sales gain tax exclusion from $500,000 for single filers and up to $1 million for joint filers. And we're talking about capital gains tax. And I thought this was massive, because I love that the government's saying, well, how do we find unlocked inventory, or how do we unlock some inventory? And maybe if we have some incentives, this can get some people off the sideline. So, Ben, what were your thoughts when you saw this story come out?
Yeah, I think it's great, right, to keep up with inflation. So context right now, it's at 250 and 500, and they're going to double both sides, right? And just for everybody listening, if you don't know, it's like if you sell the house, right, you bought it for 100, you're selling it for now 30 years later 500. You've got $400,000 of gains there that you would have to pay taxes on. And historically, if you're a single guy, you're anything above the 250, you'd be paying taxes on. Now it's 500, you'd keep it all, right?
Yeah.
So incentivizing these people to sell, I think it's great, but I think, to be honest with you, like 38% of owners in the US have owned a home or own a home right now free and clear. Okay. So for me, it's like, I think there's some people out there that if they own their house free and clear, they might be thinking further down the road of more like inheritance. It's part of their legacy,
their estate.
And this isn't going to incentivize them to sell any different than before, because they've got the cash to go buy another house cash, especially if they're going to downsize.
Yeah.
So while I love this, I just don't know how much this is actually going to really make the market shift.
Yeah. I mean, it's not going to be, I agree. I mean, this isn't going to just all of a sudden homeowners find out about this and then we have this huge influx of new listings like we'd like for them to have to happen. But certainly, we get questions all the time from sellers, and our agents bring this up in coaching calls all the time. Well, what about the guy who says, what about capital gains tax? I mean, This is a big solution, that if this capital gains tax exclusion doubles, it helps. Because if Bob and Sue, who have the house, to your point, who is maybe paid off, like this, we call this old people in big houses. That's what the strategy is called, right? Downsizers.
Yeah.
You've got these people been in the house for 40, 50 years, and they have, 800,000 of their wealth tied up in this property. Yeah. This helps them a lot. I mean, we're talking about a massive tax implication that now gets released. That's a big deal. And then those folks that are maybe at an interest rate where they're like, I don't want to sell, Colton, because I'm not going from 2.5% to 7%. If we can get a little bit more relief on mortgage interest rates, which I think we will over the summer, and you get some tax relief, maybe it's enough to get people over the hump. But Ben, I agree. I mean, it's not going to move the needle that much, but it definitely, I think, will help.
Yep.
It's not going to hurt, right? Colton,
Yeah,
I
it
don't know
gives
if
them
you
an
have any
opportunity
expert.
to diversify too, right?
What's that?
It gives them an opportunity to diversify too, right? So like I've got all this cash, like you're talking about, in my home. Now I can take some of it, put it into another home. Some of it I can put into different avenues versus everything in that real estate.
Well, what are the numbers? I mean, and I'm Ben, like you're the numbers guy, right? So like if we looked at before, I mean, capital gains, obviously there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just a straight number, but if you call it 20-25%, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now both, well, one went up 500,000, one went up 250,000, but we're talking about a tax exposure of like $40,000-$50,000 in real dollars and cents. I mean, that's not peanuts. That's not nothing. I mean, a homeowner can get that tax relief, and to your point, put that into maybe putting it down on another property to make this affordability issue, which is massive right now, get better. Maybe they've got money to invest into a lower interest rate that otherwise they wouldn't have, right? These are all, opportunities for the housing market. My main takeaway when I saw this story drop yesterday was I like that our government is looking at ways to help this very serious issue for real estate, because home prices aren't going anywhere. They're staying put. Case Shiller just came out with the home price index yesterday, and they're up again 2-3%. That's not the issue. Anytime someone's talking about a housing market crash, like we're talking about home prices. I don't think that's the risk. What we're talking about that is an absolute crisis is transactions, home sales. They have fallen off an absolute cliff. I mean, we are back in 2008, 2009 territory, because the new seasonality, the new projection is that we go way back down to 4.2, 4.3 million home sales. And the last time that we saw that was during the Great Recession. That's the real crisis. And it's obviously because of mortgage interest rates, and there's just nothing for sale. Which brings me up, I guess, into another really good story that just dropped yesterday, which stated that more than 2 in 5 home sellers, 2 in 5, are making concessions to buyers, which is nearly double than where it was last year. So 42.9% of every real estate transaction over the past 3 months had some type of seller concession. Now, this used to be a big thing when I first got started in the industry. It was like almost every single offer you went right down to the other terms on the purchase contract. Your eyeballs were trained to go, okay, how much is the buyer asking?
Yep.
Are they asking for 3% concessions, or what are they asking for? But then it fell off a cliff. I mean, if an offer over the last 5 years even had seller concessions, it was a quick call to the buyer's agent, like, buddy, go back to the drawing board. Wrong time, wrong place. None of that's happening. But when you see almost half of the transactions closing right now with seller concessions, maybe this is another thing that real estate agents are communicating to their client to say, listen, maybe this is how we get the home sold. And to buyers, it's like, well, buyer, yeah, rates are at 7%. It's not ideal, but we can get concessions from the seller and use those funds to invest into a lower interest rate, making these properties more affordable. It's another call. I would call it an unlocking to a new level, like in Mario Brothers, that will help more transactions happen. And there's all kinds of strategic ways on how to write those offers and how to navigate your sellers through that. Because the same report said not only are home sellers giving concessions to get their home sold, but it also said that 1 in 5, 20% during the same period ended up having to sell the home for below asking price. That's a big deal. Because for a long time, we saw real estate transactions on average over the asking price. That's dropping that list to sold price ratio. So here's my thought on this, and then I want to get your guys' thoughts on it. Is if I'm representing a buyer or a seller, the key takeaway is that there are options that maybe in a way to structure a transaction that maybe most buyers or sellers aren't familiar with. And that's what we're talking about is seller concessions. And if I can go to a seller to say, listen, I know there's not a lot of buyers out there, but here's maybe what we can do from a pricing strategy perspective. We could price the property in a way that has the price built into it, some type of offering, right? Some type of offering to a buyer that would incentivize them to purchase your home over the competition. And then the same thing for my buyer client. I know housing affordability is insane, and I know there's not a lot out there, but if we can get these concessions from a seller, does that help ease that burden of down payment and monthly mortgage payment? Ben, your thoughts?
It appears that a lot of this is coming from prices being too high still, right? So sellers still want 2020 prices and buyers want '08 prices, right?
So true.
So I think that maybe it lets it be a win-win. The seller gets to feel good about getting his price, and the buyer's net price is lower to more in line with where they need to be. And I think over time, those prices will adjust back because we're still 40% over, where prices were pre-pandemic. So as they kind of creep back, which you've talked a lot about, to those normal inflation over pre-pandemic, of 3 to 6% a year, this will help kind of back it down and for people's new reality to kind of come to fruition, if you will.
For sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Colton.
And it's going to take time too. Like you said earlier, there's not going to be one broad stroke that fixes the housing market. It's these little things. It's the tax incentive. It's concessions are coming back, and it's all these little chips. I mean, it took us how many years to get here? And so, it's going to take some time to get it back to normal at the same time.
Yeah. And the other thing is this. I want to talk about how to use this in a practical sense. I'm always thinking about, okay, as a real estate agent, how can I get the edge to grow my business? Well, now you have another, another tool in your tool bag to offer a tangible value add to a buyer or seller that maybe you weren't using over the past 3, 4, 5 years. Maybe this helps you to secure more listings. Maybe this helps you to get the buyer off the fence. And I love that from a buyer's perspective, right? Because if you can, Ben, to your point, if you can create a win-win, but especially for the buyer, if you can go to the buyer and say, listen, I get it. Rates are at this percent. Well, let me ask you this. This is why new home sales are off the chart, because builders are smart. They've gone to the marketplace that says, don't pay 7%. Come with us and you can get 4 3/4. Of course, they're all going to new homes. Well, what if you could do the same thing with resale? To say, Colton, Mr. Buyer, would it help if we can get into a home that you like in the area that you want, and we can get you a payment around this because of a strategy I want to talk to you about? Would that be something you'd be opposed to? Because what do buyers care about? They only care about 2 things, right? They care about monthly payment and cash due at signing.
Yep. That's right.
What they're not doing is they don't write a check out for their purchase price every month. No. And they don't write out a check every month to an interest rate. So that's what they think about. How much is the house and what is the interest rate? But those 2 things we have to explain to the buyer, what do those 2 things mean? And that is, here's what your monthly payment will be this month and every month moving forward. Can you live with that? And if we can structure the offer in a way that allows us to get a lower interest rate, who cares about the interest rate? That's where people are stopping, Ben. Here's what the payment looks like with this strategy. And here's now your cash due at closing. You got option A and option B. It opens up a whole new world, I think, for buyers and sellers if agents continue to communicate this to their clients or to their potential clients.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, I think part of it too is back to my previous point is we have people still out there that have been, this payment got them this all-inclusive vacation, and now the same payment is getting them, a very different vacation, very different home than it did before. And I think as you get through this cycle and it's the new norm, you get new buyers, new sellers in the new norm, then it will loosen things up as well. So I had another thought too on just concessions and just, back in the previous market we were in before, this is where we're at now. We need to be more creative, right? So the sellers need to be more creative. The buyers coming in need to be more creative. And, as I start thinking about creativity, and it gets me thinking about creative finance. And I think in today's world, a lot of creative finance the last couple of years have been in the investor world and been ways that people could get in to buy these more expensive pieces of real estate for less money down, etc. But as we move in, maybe on the residential side, something to keep in mind is back to something we talked about earlier, 38% of people own a home free and clear. What if, as we're sitting down with sellers, we present an idea of potentially changing things where they get more money, but it also incentivizes a buyer to be able to win as well. So I think about something that was done a lot in 08, 09, 10 is seller financing, right? So, definitely consult with an attorney to draft this stuff up. Don't go, back behind, the house and just draft it up yourself. But, like I think about, okay, if a guy owns this house free and clear, he doesn't maybe need all the cash right now, but you set up a world where the buyer still puts 20% down. You guys come up with a reasonable interest rate. And, I read an article, it said they took a survey and 70% of prospective home buyers told the researchers that they were not willing to accept a mortgage rate above 5.5. That was the magic number, right? So if we look at the magic rate number, now you get more purchase power, right? So the seller gets a higher price, the buyer gets a monthly payment to justify that price, and it's a win-win. And it doesn't have to be traditional 30-year mortgage.
Right.
Go in there, 5.5%, 20% down with a 3 or a 5-year balloon, where the seller can sell his house and win. The buyer gets into the house and wins. And then in 5 years, the seller gets all of his cash to go do something different and can kind of spread out some of that gain.
I love it.
A little bit.
I love it. I think seller financing is a phenomenal option. And that was another thing too that kind of fell off a cliff over the last 5 years. Like, you try to look for a land contract out there, like, good luck. It ain't happening. It ain't happening. But now, as this market shifts, I think that's a really good point, Ben, is that, and I think it has to do with awareness. And I think it's our job as real estate professionals to walk people through all of their options, because a land contract is such a great opportunity for the right person. And it's just about being creative. It's not just, interest rates are up and there's no inventory, so let me sit on my hands and Charlie Brown, just do nothing. It's like, no, you've got some other options. Let's go communicate this, because, to your point, Bob and Sue, sitting on 900,000 of equity, houses paid off. They don't need all of the money, but now they can move and get a return on that property. And how many people are out there, to your point, almost 40% of the people out there have a house that's paid off that has gone up in value 25, 30, 35, 40% over the last 3 years. Take advantage of that.
Right.
Sell at a high price. Buyer gets into the house at a payment that is affordable, to your point. Yeah, I think that could be a win-win.
So, just to get super tactical, companies like, because I know people are sitting there, well, yeah, sure, that sounds great. How do I get in touch with these people? Companies like the Share Group, you can reach out to, you can get a list of all the property owners that own X amount of equity in their home, 100%, whatever. Maybe you go after people that have a master bedroom on the second level. And then you start, or people that are now not selling and renting these massive 5-bed, $1.5 million properties. And you start to have those conversations.
Yeah. Now you're starting to talk about, which I love, Ben, demographic farming. Because agents are so used to geographic farming. Every single agent that will watch the show says, oh yeah, I've heard about geographic farming. But then I ask them, well, are you doing any demographic farming? To which they respond and look at me like with, sideways, like, what is that? And so, yeah, I love that tip or that advice, Ben, is to go out there, get a list of all the people in your market that have a home, free and clear, and create a marketing or a prospecting plan of action to go and communicate with those folks. I love it.
Cool. Well, tee us up on some more tactical stuff. Maybe how, I know you had something you wanted to chat about, but just getting into client service and some practical things there too.